Once upon a time, we're told, a princess is born into castles, applause, and fairy tale certainty. Soft blankets, golden cradles, a life of privilege. But Princess Leonor's story never really fit that fantasy. Because from the moment she took her first breath, her future was already written, long before she could speak, walk, or choose who she wanted to be. While other children learned freedom through play, Leonor was quietly learning restraint. While bedtime stories promised happily ever after, hers came with footnotes, rules, and the weight of a nation watching. This wasn't just a childhood, it was preparation, training, expectation. Every smile rehearsed, every silence measured, every step guided toward a throne she never asked for but could never escape. So here's the question no fairy tale ever asks. What does it actually cost to raise a child for a crown in the modern world? Because for Princess Leonor, childhood was never really her own. Princess Leonor de Bourbon isn't just another royal name whispered in palace halls. She is the future of Spain's monarchy, the heir presumptive, first in line to the throne, and the youngest person in the country carrying a responsibility that dates back centuries. Spain is a constitutional monarchy, meaning the royal family doesn't rule the nation, but it represents it. The crown survives on public trust, symbolism, and stability. Kings and queens are expected to unite the country, rise above politics, and embody continuity in a modern democratic world that no longer needs royalty to govern, but still watches it closely. That's what makes Leonor's position so rare. In an era where many monarchies have collapsed or faded into irrelevance, Spain is raising a young woman, not a prince, to inherit the crown. A female heir in a modern European monarchy is no longer impossible, but it is still unusual, and it comes with scrutiny that is sharper, expectations that are heavier, and standards that are often unforgiving. To the public, Leonor appears composed, intelligent, almost untouchable, carefully photographed, carefully spoken, admired from a distance, protected not just by security, but by silence. We see her at ceremonies, delivering speeches beyond her years, standing perfectly still under the gaze of history. But beneath that polished image lies something much larger at stake. Because Leonor isn't just a princess in waiting. She is a symbol of continuity, of legitimacy, of whether Spain's monarchy can survive another generation in a world that questions. Princess Leonor was born on October 31st, 2005, and from that moment, her life carried historical weight. She wasn't just a newborn welcomed by family. She was the future Queen of Spain, arriving into a monarchy still redefining its place in the 21st century. Her birth quietly secured the line of succession, and with it, the crown's hopes for continuity. Her parents, King Felipe VI and Queen Letizia, represented a new kind of royal image. Educated, media-savvy, modern on the surface. But behind palace walls, their approach to raising Leonor was anything but relaxed. This was a household shaped by discipline, structure, and control. Emotions were not indulged publicly. Privacy was guarded fiercely. Every habit, every routine, every lesson was shaped with one outcome in mind. From a young age, Leonor's world was carefully narrowed. Schooling was selected, not chosen. Friendships were filtered. Appearances were planned months in advance. When she stepped into public view, it was always with purpose, never spontaneous, never unguarded. Even her smiles seemed measured, as if joy itself had a protocol. Yet traces of an ordinary childhood still existed, quietly and briefly, learning languages, playing piano, sharing moments with her younger sister, Sophia. Glimpses of a girl growing up, quickly hidden behind formality and duty. Because while other children were allowed to explore who they might become, Leonor was being shaped around who she had to be. Her education emphasized responsibility over curiosity, history over imagination, poise over impulse. She was taught how to stand, how to speak, how to remain calm under scrutiny, skills most adults struggle to master. It wasn't cruelty, it was preparation. But preparation has a cost, and growing up inside a royal system means learning early that your life is not entirely your own. For Princess Leonor, childhood wasn't something to discover freely. It was something to manage, carefully, quietly, and always under watch. From the outside, Princess Leonor's life appears quiet, almost protected. But silence doesn't mean absence of pressure. In fact, for Leonor, silence is the pressure. From an early age, she grew up under constant observation, not loud tabloid chaos, but something colder, more controlled. Cameras that never quite left, analysts dissecting her posture, her tone, her expressions, searching for signs of strength, weakness, confidence, doubt. She wasn't being watched for who she was, but for what she represented. And what she represented mattered deeply. Spain's monarchy was still recovering from past scandals that shook public trust. Mistakes made by previous generations cast long shadows, and Leonor inherited those shadows without ever earning them. She wasn't just expected to grow up, she was expected to restore belief, to embody stability before she even understood what instability meant. That's why the rules around her were so strict. The media rarely spoke freely about her personal life, but they never stopped watching. A strange contradiction. Silence on the surface, scrutiny underneath. Every public appearance became a test, not of personality, but of control. When Leonor delivered her first public speeches, the tension was visible. A slight tremor in her voice, carefully paced breaths, hands clasped tightly as if anchoring herself in place. These weren't flaws, but they were human, and yet even those small moments were analyzed frame by frame. You see, every word mattered, every movement mattered. Her body language had to project calm, her voice had to sound assured. Emotion was allowed in precise, acceptable doses. Too little and she seemed distant, too much and she seemed unprepared. Perfection wasn't encouraged, it was assumed. She's often compared to other young royals, more relaxed, more playful, more publicly expressive, but Leonor feels different, more contained, more serious, less like a celebrity royal and more like an institution already taking shape. That difference comes at a cost, because maturity, when forced too early, often looks like strength, but feels like isolation. Leonor learned discipline before freedom, composure before self-expression. She learned how to carry expectation before she learned how to set it down. And while the world praised her poise, very few asked what it took to maintain it. Behind the stillness was a child learning emotional restraint as survival, learning that mistakes weren't just personal, they were symbolic, that vulnerability wasn't just risky. There comes a moment in every royal life when preparation ends and responsibility begins. For Princess Leonor, that moment didn't arrive with a crown or a coronation. It arrived quietly, deliberately, and in full view of the nation. Her oath to the Spanish Constitution marked the shift. Standing beneath centuries of history, Leonor spoke words that transformed her role from future possibility into present reality. This wasn't ceremony for tradition's sake. It was a declaration. She was no longer being shaped for the crown. She was actively carrying it. Soon after came military training, the uniforms, the rigid routines, the physical and mental discipline designed to prepare a head of state. For a young woman raised under restraint, this wasn't a dramatic departure, it was an escalation, another layer of expectation added to an already heavy load. But this time, the symbolism was unmistakable. Spain wasn't just watching a princess grow up, it was watching an heir take form. Her formal speeches changed too. The hesitation softened, the pauses became intentional. Her voice steadied not because the pressure disappeared, but because she learned how to hold it. The child the public once saw was giving way to something more complex, more controlled, more aware of consequence. And that's when it became real. This was no longer preparation. This was real. Every appearance now carried historical weight. When Leonor stood at attention, she wasn't representing youth or promise. She was representing continuity, stability, the future of an institution that has survived only by convincing people it still matters. The public responded with admiration, but also concern, pride in her composure, unease at how much responsibility rested on someone so young, applause mixed with quiet questions no one dared ask out loud, because something fundamental had changed. Leonor hadn't rebelled, she hadn't broken free, she had stepped forward, accepted the role placed before her, and in doing so crossed an invisible line, from protected child to visible symbol. There was no dramatic explosion, no emotional outburst, just a subtle, irreversible shift. A young woman standing straighter, speaking more carefully, carrying history not as an idea, but as a daily reality. And from that moment on, there was no turning back. Stepping fully into her role didn't bring freedom, it narrowed it. As Princess Leonor moves closer to adulthood, privacy becomes less a right and more a memory. Every decision now carries consequence: where she studies, who stands beside her, how long she smiles. Adulthood for her doesn't mean independence, it means visibility. The expectations only tighten. Emotional restraint is no longer training, it's policy. Vulnerability must be managed. Personal desires weighed against public meaning. Even silence can be misinterpreted, turned into headlines or concern. The margin for error grows thinner with every year. Her future, too, is already shaped. Relationships will never be private. Friendships will be scrutinized. Love, if and when it comes, will be evaluated not just for compatibility, but for symbolism. Freedom exists, but only within carefully drawn borders. And perfection has its own cost. Because being flawless in public means never fully exhaling, never reacting instinctively, always choosing composure over honesty. The world rewards that control with praise, but rarely asks what it takes to maintain it. The crown doesn't crush all at once. It presses slowly. It presses through routine, expectation, and restraint, through the quiet understanding that mistakes are no longer personal, they're institutional. That self-expression must always be balanced against duty. For Leonor, the future is uncertain. It's defined. And while she wears that certainty with grace, the weight of it is something no ceremony can remove. Only Princess Leonor stands at a crossroads few people will ever understand. To the world, she is a symbol of continuity, a modern monarchy learning how to survive in a century that questions inherited power. Calm, prepared, unshakable. But beneath the symbolism is a human question that never goes away. Should duty outweigh personal freedom? Should a life be shaped entirely by what it represents, rather than what it feels? Leonor may one day wear a crown, but whether she will ever truly own her choices remains unknown. Her future has been planned with precision, her role defined with care. And yet, happiness is something no constitution can guarantee. So perhaps the real story isn't about when she becomes queen, but who she becomes along the way. And maybe one day, we'll finally know who Princess Leonor is, when no one is watching.